Hey, everybody, welcome to the Shea Anything podcast. You're going to get all three of us in today's episode, and here's why. We recorded with Keith, as usual, on Thursday. We talked a lot of baseball, and that conversation is all still relevant because of the Mets postponement on Thursday night, which is what we're about to talk about. And by we, I mean Andy Martino and myself. And we'll get to the baseball stuff with Keith in just a second. Andy, before we started taping, I told you that I really didn't know where I was going to begin here on this episode. There's a lot to discuss. We had, obviously, this all started with the strike in the NBA with the Milwaukee Bucks. Then it came to Major League Baseball. We had several postponements. We had Dom Smith and saying his, really eloquent, emotional, painful words. And then that went viral, and then the Mets did what they did. They came out onto the field at 7:08, their usual time for first pitch, and they came off the field, and the Black Lives Matter T-shirt on home plate. So this being a Mets podcast, it would be malpractice not to at least discuss what the Mets did and what this means in the context of 2020, the lives of Black people in America. And how much you think this matters in the grand scheme of things in terms of what baseball players and athletes are doing with their platforms and the difference that they can make. So what was your reaction to what we saw, not only with what the Mets did on the field, but with what Michael Conforto and Robinson Cano and Dom Smith and Del Betances said after?
Well, I think, Doug, being asked for my reaction is an interesting thing because I completely agree with you that it would be malpractice to not discuss what is probably going to be one of the more historic Mets moments in the history of the franchise, walking off the field before playing a game in the name of racial justice. But I also feel that I am unqualified to really comment much on what Black and brown men and women go through in this country. I say men and women. There's also an epidemic of killings of Black trans women. So like there's so much racial violence and injustice that is being addressed, and I can certainly do my very best to listen and learn about ways that I can be an ally. But I don't feel that it's mine or your role to give too many takes or opinions or tweets on something like this. I think it's not, white people aren't very good at shutting up. We're pretty confident in our own opinions, but this is a good example of when we should lay back and lay out and kind of shut up and let people like Dom Smith and who have more direct experience with racism to come to the forefront. And what I liked, having said all that, what I liked, you see, you can't get away from this ego that we have in this business, but what I was moved by and what the Mets and the Marlins did was that it was player driven. It was came out of Dom Smith's authentic, raw, emotional comments the night before. It wasn't handed down top down from corporate MLB or either of the teams. It was devised by players, Michael Conforto, Miguel Rojas, Smith, and plenty of other guys that decided how they were going to execute this thing, how they were going to do it. I did not like the opening day Black Lives Matter protest from the standpoint of it wasn't good enough. Not from the standpoint of keep politics out of baseball, but from the standpoint of corporate. I feel like you're taking the teeth out of protests when you endorse them by a corporation like that, like MLB did. So I liked this better because it was from the ground up and not from the top down. So those are my first couple of thoughts.
Yep, it was organic. To me, I was impressed by the leadership of Michael Conforto and Miguel Rojas in coming up with this idea. And again, and Andy and I discussed this before we started recording. We don't have takes. You don't need our takes. We're two white guys in this conversation. But again, you can listen to Dom Smith. You can listen to, I keep bringing up Robert Ory because I was moved by that, but being moved by these things and being affected by them and using them to frame the way you view the world is one thing, but also having the self-awareness to know that the world doesn't need to hear from Doug Williams and Andy Martino about racial injustice is also relevant to this conversation. So with that, we just wanted to say a couple things about that and really frame this the way it should be framed, that this is the primary story right now in Major League Baseball and with the New York Mets. And they had a historic postponement of their game on Thursday night. But here we are on Friday, and we still haven't had a game since we recorded with Keith. Talked a lot about the very interesting goings on with the Mets on the field. So with that, we'll lay out here, and we'll bring back what we recorded on Thursday with Keith. Doug Williams and Keith Hernandez with you once again, Mondays and Thursdays during the 2020 season. Please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. We're grateful, as always, for you listening. Since we last spoke, it's been a bumpy road for the Mets since you and I last spoke, Keith. And obviously, they had some games postponed due to positive COVID tests. And in the last couple of days, 1-2 against the Marlins, including a sweep of a doubleheader in which you were in the booth for, in which they did not score a run. They did sneak a win last night. I know you were off, but that was certainly sporty there, Keith. And we're going to talk about Edwin Diaz a little bit later, but it makes you realize how difficult a situation Rojas is in with this bullpen without Seth Lugo in it.
Well, it's also the fact that Peterson's down, Walker's down, Porcello has not pitched well. So it's a scramble. And it's not like you have 3 months left in the season, where if this was a normal season right now, we'd be in around game 125. It's a stretch run. So there's a little over 30 games left. There's no need to panic. You're 4 out. It was very unfortunate that they had the interruption in play because they were ready to go for a sweep against the Marlins. They were starting to win the bat good, and then they're stopped for 5 days. I can't relate to that. I've never had that experience. Baseball is a rhythmic game. It's every day. It's got to be tough. They couldn't work out, evidently. So, but the Marlins were in the same boat, and the Mets right now are just having problems driving in runs, and I think it's in their head. It has to be collectively, team-wide. Someone's going to have to start driving in runs to overcome this, to push the ball forward and get out of the rut. But it all stems from the fact that they've got their starting rotation with Matz in the bullpen, who was ineffective, very ineffective, and you lost 3 of your 5 starters, and you got these doubleheaders. My feeling is I wouldn't have moved Lugo to the starting rotation, particularly if it was only going to be for 3 innings. You haven't got all year to stretch him out. How much is he going to throw next time out? 5 innings? Okay. I just feel that with today's game, with the emphasis on bullpen more than starting pitching, and you've got double headers where you're only playing 7 innings, which I happen to like, but I wouldn't want it on single games. I would want 9 innings, but certainly for double headers, I didn't mind. It was like the old minor league days. But now, you're it's almost like paying Peter to pay Paul. It's one of those things. You move Lugo to the rotation to try to shore that up, and really 3 innings shores it up.
Yeah,
I think so. And then you take away from your bullpen, which is today's game is critical. I know that Diaz was throwing great in non-pressurized roles, and he was throwing good. I was impressed, but you can't walk in a runner. I came in and did that. So that kind of upsets the equation, what they were thinking. I think the brain trusts here, and then they got to be worried. But my feeling is now, I don't care how bad Matz has pitched. Matz has got to get, he's wasting away in the bullpen. They're not going to, what are they going to use him for?
Well, let's see. It may be announced later. I don't know when everybody's listening to this that Matz is back in the rotation. It's conceivable because the Mets obviously have a bunch of games coming up, and he may be an option, whether it's tonight, meaning Thursday, or against the Yankees this weekend. Walker may be an option. He may be healthy enough. He threw yesterday, so it looks like maybe the rotation will look a little bit more normal. But you and I agree on Matz, and we agree on Lugo too. I mean, if you're going to make that big of a move that changes the way your team gets outs every night, then at least to let him throw 60 pitches. I don't know. It's too short a season to your point, have him go 3 innings and that be it. And you have that moment where you're watching Lugo as a starter and you're like, wow, this may be the number 2 behind DeGrom that they've been waiting for. and then he's out of the game. There's not enough time to even get excited about the potential that he has.
Yeah, they're so protective of pitchers today, and I don't know. I'm not a pitching coach. I never paid attention. All I knew that you couldn't do a starter could only go once every fifth day, and you didn't want to. And I played for teams where we had bullpens that were overworked by managers, and so it's not my area of expertise. But it just seems to me, if you're in today's game, would you rather have a great starting rotation or would you rather have a great bullpen? I'd rather have a bullpen, particularly in today's game. So we'll see how it transpires. So the Mets are prisoner to the health of Peterson and Waka. I mean, can they come and pitch? And can they come back and pitch effectively? You got Porcello and Waka in the offseason, two aging veterans. It's okay. Can we get lightning in a bottle? Can they find their old form? Well, they haven't. But I did like those moves, getting those two. I thought Porcello was going to was the best pickup because he's a sinker ball pitcher. But his last start out, he was up here again with his fastball and not down throwing his sinker. And he can't live up there. And he did not have a good outing. He's 1-4 now. So I think with the little time left in the season, that's why I think there's all this jiggling around with the pitching staff, which means the pitching staff isn't so stacked and so good.
It's funny, Keith, because as we were getting ready to tape, you were rewatching some of the late inning issues that Diaz and Brock and Wilson had last night. And I was on vacation this weekend, actually. So going into it, I'm thinking Mets, Yankees, I'm going to have a lot of DVRing to do for when I come back. So I leave Friday. I come back Tuesday afternoon. I didn't miss a single game, which was so strange because of what happened. So what'd you do this weekend? I mean, we've talked so much about how many days in a row you were working. No baseball. How'd you spend your time?
I pulled weeds. I fixed one of my leaky faucets. I had to get a new T-valve on one of my outdoor faucets. I went up on the roof and cleaned. I like to do those things. People think I'm crazy. You can pay people for that. I like to get. And then baseball, I can't do it. Because if I do it during the day, and I'll be too tired for a night game. So it gave me an opportunity to get out in the yard, do things around here, kind of clean up and. I just read and passed the time. I mean, it was 5 days off.
Picturing you like Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but he's up on the roof fixing stuff with his shirt off. That's quite an image. So, Keith, let's talk about Jacob deGrom. I mean, last night, he's just so incredibly good. And we actually spoke about this last night on Baseball in New York, just about how each game seems different. That, he's facing the Marlins for like the third time this season, and yet they see a different pitcher every time they see him. Do you see that he has a different repertoire almost every night, depending on what he has working for him?
Well, I thought that early in the season he fell too much in love with his changeup and his secondary pitches when he's throwing 100 miles an hour on the gun 98. I love his fastball. I mean, he got a lot of strikeouts with his fastball last night, if I'm correct. He's just a great pitcher. The Marlins are an overmatch. I mean, to me, if I'm Jacob, I send a limo for that lineup. Make sure they get the ballpark. I mean, there's just no match for him. And it's no insult. I mean, he's one of the great pitchers. But what's just absolutely astounding is that he doesn't get a win in his last two starts. If he's at Vegas, and he's at the crap table, I am betting against him. I'm putting my money against him. The snake eyes is going to come up. You know it. The poor guy's snake bit.
I mean, I know that you still value the win, and you a lot of times on the broadcast will keep the starting pitcher in mind later in the game and say, doesn't get the win. And I mean, what do you think he thinks of that stat? Because he knows that it has no reflection on how good he's been, because his team consistently either doesn't score runs for him or buries the leads late in games that were built when he was on the mound.
Well, it's got to be horribly frustrating. I mean, it would be worse if he got a loss. Okay.
Yeah.
The time passed. At least it hasn't happened this year where he's lost 1-0, or 2-1. He's getting no decisions. So that's no solace, but it's better than an L. But he's got to be horribly frustrated. And again, if he's pitching back in my day, he's going 9 innings. He's taking care of his business. He would go 9 and shut the door. And it's just not. It's not in the game. It's not part of the game today. And as a result, he has suffered. I guarantee you, you go back in his career and all the no decisions, he would have 20, 25 more wins, 30 wins. He'd close the door. He'd be a complete game guy because he's effortless when he pitches. He can go 9, but it's just not part of the game today.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to entrust him in the bullpen. I mean, I remember Bob Gibson. They asked him one time, and Bob Gibson said, "They said, well, it was August in St. Louis, and why? How it was? Bob was in his mid-late 30s. How can you get all these complete games? It's so hot." And he goes, "You ever notice me looking down that bullpen in the 7th inning, and I went out, or 8th inning or 9th inning?" He goes, "That's why I go 9."
I mean, I love the stats sometimes we put up on the broadcasts of Doc Gooden, Tom Seaver, Jacob deGrom, the 3 best starting pitchers in Mets history. And every stat line is so similar through this point in their careers. And then complete games is just so eye-openingly different. Yeah. And you're right, he would have a lot more wins. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day, potentially with like 120 career wins. And we're going to have to be the ones to tell the story to the later generations where we say he was that great. It was not his own doing, was not his fault that win column is so little and so low. Also wanted to get your take, Keith, on, I know you were in the booth for the Birdie stolen bases, stole second, stole third, stole home. And one thing that I've talked to Andy about this more than I've talked to you about it is Rojas after games has been honest in his post-game assessment of his players, which is not common in today's game. A lot of managers will just support their guy publicly pretty much no matter what and say, it was just a hustle play by Birdie, and it's not on JD Davis to cover third on a delayed steal, and Ali Sanchez is in a position where he's probably not ready to be a big leaguer. It's not his fault for lollipopping the throw back to the pitcher. That's not what Rojas has done. What do you think of that? If you're a player on the Mets team and you're JD Davis and your manager is saying, yeah, JD's got to get to the bag, what's your reaction? Is that, okay, good, my manager should be challenging the players publicly, or would you rather the manager just publicly tell the media these guys are fine?
I have no problem with him saying that, but why isn't it being done in game? You got an outfield coach, you got an infield coach on the bench. And JD Davis playing that deep, and I noted that, and I said, you can take a lead as far away from third base if you're the runner as equidistant to what the third baseman is off the bag. Now, why play him back? It's a little extra effort, and JD is one of those hard workers. Okay, I don't think he really knew. But why do you have to be all the way back? Why can't the pitcher starts his windup or his stretch? You can be 10 feet behind him. Therefore, he can only take a 10-foot lead and then move back as the pitcher begins his motion home to deliver the pitch. That's what I used to do when I played behind a runner at first base. I just couldn't play back 15 feet behind him, but he'd be able to get a big lead, and it would be inviting him to steal second base. So I would be behind him, depending on the speed of the runner. I would be this far for like a Vince Coleman or Billy Hamilton. I'll be contemporary, and
we'll get the fax line going again soon.
If I have Ramos, if I was playing behind Ramos, which I would all the time, then I can play 10 feet behind Ramos. He's not going anywhere. But I would still move back. What's the reason why you're playing deep? To cover more ground. A ball hit hard down the line or in the hole. Same thing for third base. He could just have been in maybe 10 feet and close to the line because he was close to the line. Therefore, birdie can't come down the line but 10 feet, not halfway, inviting. And then, what Sanchez did was inexcusable. You just don't throw a lollipop back. And even after, Ron made this point, and it's a little extra work, is, okay, when the pitch hits home, as you're the third baseman, you've got to come in a little bit just to let birdie know there could be a pickoff play. After the catcher catches the ball, you just kind of trot in. And that forces birdie, because birdie looked back to see where, that's when he looked back, he made his choice. Okay, I'm going to try this. Instantly, that first look, he saw Davis way back on the outfield grass, on the fringe, the cut, almost, right? And then he said, okay, I don't have to, I'll just fake it 2 steps and boom. Now, I guarantee you, if Davis was coming in, he would not have done that. So those are mental errors. I don't mind the physical errors, the team not being able to score runs, and they're 0 for 15 in the doubleheader. I don't care what they've hit so far this year of men in base, hasn't been good. It's been porous. They're trying. But the mental errors, those are mental errors. And that, to me, I just felt was, after that game, it could have been a call for a manager to call a meeting and chew his team out. And I think that would, I think the people are afraid to do that today. And I think players would be responsive to that. I really do. And it might wake them up.
Yeah, JD said that Rojas did speak to him mid-game about it. And I think what I'm curious about, Keith, if it's the third or fourth pitch into an at-bat and these things are happening, Birdie's getting a big secondary lead. When Rojas condemns the player after the game, and it wasn't strong, but he's mentioning names. Do you think it is, you mentioned the coaching staff. How closely should they be watching the game to yell out to the player, hey, JD, come in a little bit? Who is that on? I know you're talking about the player, but is the coaching staff a little bit guilty here as well?
I think that's their plan going in, and they wanted him to play there. But he wouldn't have played there if he wasn't. Everything's sort of scripted. They all got the little index cards now. They're looking where they got to play for a hitter, which go figure. It's just a lot of people are trying to rewrite this game, and it's just not as difficult as they're making it. And they think they've got it figured out, and it's pie in their face as far as I'm concerned. What happened? That was an embarrassment. What happened on the second game of that doubleheader in the 9th inning, and that will never happen again. But it's just a lack of awareness. And I will say one thing, and this has been a very strange and bizarre season. You've got this COVID stuff. They're starting late. There's no fans. How do you get an adrenaline pump when you got nobody you haven't got 20,000 people in the ballpark, or 30 or 40? It's got to be tough. You're going to find ways to get that adrenaline flowing when you're a player. And I think it's got to be very difficult for them. So you can tend to wander, maybe daydream out there. And it's a battle to stay focused on the game. So I'm sympathetic to the season and how it is. It's an unusual season. But, everybody else is in the same boat. You've got the Dodgers with over 20 wins. You've got all American League, you got a ton of teams over 20 wins. There's teams out there that are doing it, they're having success. And this team's got talent. And then, the pitching is diminished right now because of injury, but they got to play better than that. If you play like that, you don't deserve to win.
All right, we'll leave Louis there. Let's move on to the 3-batter rule. Keith, Jeff McNeil, he just looks to me like a different guy. And what do you think this is? Do you think this is just a slump for a guy who doesn't go through many of them? Or do you think he's in his own head? Do you think it's a mental issue, as Rojas has alluded to a couple of times?
I just wonder about the knee, and when he was hurt prior, right? Was he the one that had the intercostal injury? He had 2.
I don't know. There's been so many, but
his knee was the second one, And so I'm wondering if that's affecting him. He should be fine by now. I just wonder if, physically he might be ailing a little bit. And when you're hurting, you tend to be too quick. I see him being too quick. I see him pulling off the ball. I see him also uppercutting a little more like a Richie Hebner swing, or more of a hockey swing. And I'm seeing him for some reason taking pitches, a lot more pitches. And I listened to J.D. Davis did a Zoom interview before the game 2 days ago, and I listened to it, and he was talking about how they're trying to get all these players are helping each other. I don't get it. But trying to get him to take more pitches, be more selective. Leave him alone. Let him swing the bat. He's one of the best first ball hitters I've ever seen, and he doesn't chase bad pitches. Don't change his style. Let him swing the bat. He needs to focus more up the middle right now. Try to level his swing off a little more. Not so much. He hit the 16 home runs in the second half. Forget about the home run. Get your stroke back. Stay in there. He's pulling on. He's almost like Ichiro. He runs to first base on a swing. He's very adept at it. He's got a great eye. And as a fact, because he's pulling a little bit too quick, he's chased more pitches than I've seen him than last year. Now, they're pitching him differently now. I mean, they're pitching him. They respect him. They're pitching him tough. So he has to make that adjustment. This is the way. It's not going to change until he starts hitting. So he has to make the adjustment. And once he makes the adjustment and he counters what they're doing, then they got to change. And when they change, they're going to start throwing back into his strength. So he got a hit last night. I think, was it last night to left field, or was it the night before? I was happy to see that. He needs to do that. When you're not feeling good at the plate, you can't wail. You can't go up there and wail. You got to find your stroke, and then when you get your rhythm back, and when you break out of a slump, you break out hot, then you can start. If you get a pitch you like, you can let it go. But until you find it, you've got to go back to basics. And I want to see him go more over the shortstop's head up the middle. Let's keep that shoulder in a little longer. Don't start running. He's been running a little bit too quick. So we'll see. I'll watch him tonight.
Yeah, it was so interesting you mentioned Ichiro, because McNeil's always had that fallback plan of those kind of those dirty hits, those kind of maybe he's down in the count, just puts the bat out there, and he's already moving to the first base line and gets those hits. Those haven't been coming as much as they were last year and the year before. So something to watch for. Like you said, we'll watch tonight. Ahmed Rosario. Now, on-base percentage was a huge part of your game. Being selective, taking walks. The not walking thing. Are we making too much out of that? Because when he's right, he's a good aggressive hitter, or does he need to learn how to be selective at the plate in order to be an everyday player in the big leagues?
I don't see him chasing so terribly. He is, to a degree. But Rosario is a kind of hard guy to put your finger on. He is a loosey-goosey hitter, and you want him to maintain his aggressiveness. I can't figure out why he's struggling so. And I know that he's swinging more at that pitch inside, that hard sinker, what you can't hit, that starts out as striking and it's this far inside. And there's no way you can hit that pitch. It's too far out of the strike zone. I think he's trying to cover too much of the plate. And maybe he needs to, what I call area hit, or they would probably call it zone hit. Pick one half of the plate. How much can you cover? I could cover a third of the plate against left-handers. I can cover the whole plate against right-handers. But left-handers, I stood on top of the plate. So I had to take, if I was looking away, which I did predominantly, I had to take that pitch inner half inside corner. I had to take it, discipline myself to take it because I was too close to the plate. And then I had this much of the third, 3/4 of the plate out there, and vice versa if I looked in. That I had to take that out here. I think he needs to discipline himself on picking whatever he can handle, whether it's 3/4 of the plate or half the plate, but pick away or in and stay disciplined on that. He's trying to cover too much. And they're pitching everybody different. They're pitching inside this year. The baseball's starting to pitch inside. You see a lot of catchers set up high. See, especially the Marlins. Pete Alfonso and they're all or Conforto. Look at how far I've seen countless times giving a number one and coming inside and pitching up and in. And that's the toughest pitch to hit in baseball. And that's a pitch as a hitter you have to learn to lay off, unless you're looking in. If you're going up the middle, you've got to take that pitch. It's a tough pitch to hit, especially the guy throwing hard. And so our hitters are being pitched differently this year because they had success. It's a brand new year. They're being it's respected. They know that they're not easy outs, and they got a plan to get them. And they're doing the same thing to Pete. They're pounding Pete in, and then throwing the bad breaking ball. Game hasn't changed. Up and in, low and away.
Last one, and we mentioned Diaz earlier, but I know that you are not a fan of babying any player, and I'm not saying that that's what the Mets need to do with Edwin Diaz, but to go from having him come in strictly as a one-inning guy to clean innings, to now being not only their number one reliever with Seth Lugo no longer in the rotation, but to come put out fires, is it fair to expect a guy to go from one role to a completely different one and to just use a skill set that they have not relied on him for in the past?
Well, what blew up last night was the Justin Wilson, who's been fantastic. He gave up the 3 hits. Unfortunately, the one blooper, over second base, just out of the reach of McNeil. That could have been caught. Then there's 2 outs, runners on first and second, and he might get out of the inning. So that was unfortunate. That's the breaks of the game right there. He hadn't pitched in over a week. He's solid. I think Justin Wilson is solid, and he will be steady. He hadn't pitched in over a week, and I think it showed. He was rusty, and there you have the 5 days off. It just throws a wrench into the season. How do you stay in a groove? You can't. And so the Mets are fortunately have put themselves in a position where they have to get it out of first gear. They got to get it out of third gear. They got to get that thing down in fourth gear and ready to move to fifth, or it's going to be too late. Now, and I didn't answer your question. Because Lugo is now starting, you're short in your bullpen. You're short. You're going to have to rely on Betances and Hughes and Familia, and they've been erratic. But what else choice do you have? I would rather not bring in Diaz in a jam. I'd rather have him set up for the 9th inning, clean inning to start the inning to get the save, where it's just it's no one on base. That's my feeling. That's what I would do. And you just roll the dice with Betances, Familia, and Hughes. They're veteran pitchers. They've all closed before. They've been down the road. I have no problem running them out there. In the 8th inning, being the guy that sets up for the closer.
Yeah. Well, how about the fact
that you got Wilson too, if it's a left-hander.
They went with Brock over Betances, and Anthony DiComo did ask Luis Rojas about it, and he had a couple of reasons for it, including how long it takes those guys to get hot. But you're paying Betances to be that guy, and I thought it was interesting that obviously the Mets don't love the way he looks right now, or they bring him in to be the fireman and put out that fire. Keith, good stuff as always. Remember, please subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate it. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you next week here on the Shea Anything podcast.